Welcome everybody. This is the Chapter 6 lecture, and just like the Chapter 5 lecture, I hope that you complete this assignment. This assignment is due on Thursday night, and that Thursday is the 17th of October. So please get that into me by midnight. And otherwise, you know what to do. So let's keep going. Today we're talking about percent. What is percent and how do we apply it? Why is it necessary? So let's begin. As always, I'm not going to be doing the learning unit objectives. So this is a practical application of percent. So let's talk about that so that we can kind of see what we mean. So in a bag of M&Ms, we counted 55 M&Ms. Okay? Now of these, how many are yellow, blue, red, orange, green, brown, and what are the total? Okay, look down for me at the total. All right, 55 out of 55. That means we have all of them, which means that's 1, right? So in a decimal, that is a whole, right? That's 1.00. That's what it looks like. In a fraction, that's 55 over 55. In a decimal, that's 1.00. And then the percent is 100%, right? So obviously, if that's the total, any portion of that would be less than that. So any portion would be less than 55. Any decimal would be less than 1. Any percent would be less than 100. Going back to percent, cent is 100, and we're talking about each one of them per cent, which means according to each one of them. Okay? Hope that makes sense of what the actual word is. And for the decimals, we're counting it to the hundredth place. So for the yellow, we had 18. 18 out of those 55 were yellow. Okay? What does that mean? What kind of portion is that? What does that mean? So 0.33 of the bag was yellow. But for me, the one that makes most sense is that if you were to convert that to a percent, that means 32.73 rounded to 33% of that bag of M&Ms are yellow. Same thing for red. Right? Red, the red ones are my favorite, so I wish it was a bigger fraction. So 10 out of 55 M&Ms were red. If you convert that to a decimal, that's 0.18. If you convert that to a percent, we're saying 18% of the entire bag of M&Ms were red, and so forth for all of them. Notice that interestingly, the green is 5 out of 55, which is 0.09, which is only 9/100ths, which means 9% of the bag. Okay? So how do you convert decimals to percents? You already know how to convert fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions, right? So when you want to convert decimals to percents, all you have to do is move 2 places to the right because you're multiplying by 100. Okay? So just like in converting to decimals, if you need to, add zeros. So 0.66, move that decimal through to the 1/6 after the second 6, and then add the percent symbol at the end. So 0.66 becomes 66%. 8, right, means you have to move 2, and because there's no there's no digits there, you have to add the zeros. So 8 becomes 800%. Right? And then, of course, don't forget to add that 0, the percent symbol, to the end so that we know what we're talking about. Because if you don't add the percent, you just went from 8 to 800. And that is not the same number. 8 does not equal 800, but 8 does equal 800%. Remember how we said, right, in a decimal, in a fraction, it's 55 over 55, and that is a whole. The top equals the bottom. The decimal, for it to be a total, it is a whole number, right? It is 1. So in this case, we have 8, right? So we have more than 100%. We have an 8, which is 800%, all right? So the whole number is a lot. So not only do we have a whole, we have 8 wholes, which means we have 800%. So how do you round percentages? Okay, make sure that you convert from a fraction or decimal to a percent. right? Because you can't be converting the decimal or the fraction and then making it percent, because you would be converting it, you would be rounding it wrong. So 1/17%. So first of all, you want to convert it to fraction. Or, I'm sorry, first you want to convert the fraction to the decimal. So 1/17, if you were to convert that, it would be 0.05888235. Okay? And then you want to say, okay, which one is it that I want to convert to? Okay? So you want to say it's the 8 that we want to do. So what's the rule for rounding? Identify the digit that we want to round. It's the 8. Okay? Then we look at the number immediately on the right, and that number is the 2, right? So then we do our little rhyme. 4 or less, just ignore. 5 or more, add 1 more. So 2, is it 4 or less or 5 or more? It's 4 or less. So we just ignore anything to the right of our identified digit, which was the 8. Right? And since we ignore it, we don't add anything to it, we just leave it as it is. We ignore everything else. So it becomes 0.0588. All right? We get rid of it. Then we convert it to the percent. So we put it, we move our little decimal point 2 places to the right, so it becomes 5.88. Okay? So if you can notice that actually their example, the way they've set it up, is a little different to the steps. But that's okay, you still got the right answer. In the steps, they say make sure it's in percent form before rounding. So they actually wanted you to get it first to 5.88 whatever. So it would have been 5.88235, and then they would have told you which one you want to identify, and then you do it. So they needed to have switched those. These are the PowerPoints that come along with the books. I hope you took note. You took note of that. I hope that made sense. So how do you round percents? Okay, step number 1, convert it from a fraction to a decimal. Here they've got it right. Convert it from a fraction, 18/55. Convert it to a decimal. 18/55 is equal to 0.3272727. Okay. Step number 2 is make it a decimal. All right. How do you make a percent? How do you make a decimal a percent? You move the decimal point 2 places to the right. Okay, so now we've moved it from before the 3, after the 3, after the 2. So it's 32.7373. I'm sorry, 732727. Did I get that wrong? I said too many 2 7s. Okay. So now what they've done there is they've identified that digit, that 2 is the one that they want to round. So if you notice, between step 2, they've rounded that 2 to 3. Okay, that 2, that is the identified digit. Look to the number to the right, which is the second 7, if you look there. All right, that second 7, 4 or less or 5 or more? Well, 7 is more than 5. So we add 1 more to the identified digit, which is the 2. And if we add 1 to 2, it becomes 3. Okay? Remember, as soon as we round it, the way they set it up, I apologize, has been really confusing, but that 2 is becoming a 3, and then we ignore anything after that. The rest of those digits fall away. So the way they have 3, 7, 2, 7, those aren't supposed to be there. If you can see, it's supposed to stop at 32.73. So how do you convert a percent to a decimal? Well, you just do the exact opposite. Number 1, drop the percent symbol, and then move the decimal point 2 places to the left. And then, of course, if you need to, add 0, because now you're dividing by 100. So if you need to, add some zeros. Converting fractional percents to decimal. What if you have 1/4%? Okay, number 1, convert it to a decimal. So 1/4% is also 0.25%. Okay, so now 0.25%, you want to convert it to a decimal. How do you convert a decimal to a, I'm sorry, this is a fraction, 0.25%. So how do you convert a percent to a decimal? You move it 2 places to the left. right? Because you're dividing by 100, adding zeros as necessary. So 1/4% is 0.25%, which is equal to 0.0025 as a decimal number. Okay? So let's talk about it if there was a mixed number. So you would have 7 3/4%. What does that mean? Okay, number one, convert it to a improper fraction. So that's 31/4. How do you do that? 7 times 4 is 28. Add the number on top, the numerator, which is 3. So 28 plus 3 is 31. 31/4. That is a revision of the fractions that we did last week. 31/4. Okay, now we divide that out into a decimal to make that a fraction. Everything in the blue arrows are still fractions. Okay, I'm sorry, they're still percents. So don't let that fool you. So 31/4% is equal to 7.75%. Okay, the reason we added the 0 in front is because we're going to move our decimal places 2 points to the right, and we need that 0 to fill the space. So it went from between the 7s to right in front of the 0. So 7.75% in decimals is equal to 0.0775. How do you convert fractions to percents? Well, same thing. Make it a decimal and then make it a percent. Okay? So first, you want to make your fraction a decimal. How do you do that? You just divide it out. So 3 divided by 4 is equal to 0.75. And then how do you make a decimal into a percent? You move it to the right. Remember, decimal to percent, move 2 places to the right. Percent to decimal, you move 2 places to the left. Okay? So again, 1/5 is equal to 0.2. Move 2 places to the right and add the percent symbol. Don't forget to add the percent symbol as necessary because, like I said, 0.2 is not the same as 20. So if you don't put that percent, it doesn't make sense. Converting a whole percent to a fraction, all right? So 156%, that means you have your whole plus some. Right? So you have your 100%, but you have an additional 56% on top of that as well. So number one, drop the percent symbol. So 156, drop the percent symbol so you have 156. Okay? Then you multiply the number by 1/100. Now a quicker way of doing that is whatever that number is, just say over 100. Okay? That's exactly the same thing. So 156 is equal to 156/100. Okay? Now 156/100 is an improper fraction. So you want to make it into a mixed fraction, and then you want to reduce to the lowest terms. So 1/8%. How do you convert that to a fraction? Right? This is a fractional percent to a fraction. 1/8. Number one, drop the percent symbol. Number two, multiply it by 1/100. Here's where you're not going to be able to put the divided by 100 because it's already a fraction. So multiply the top by 1, multiply the bottom by 100, and so it becomes 1/800. Reduce to the lowest terms. 1/800 cannot get any simpler than it is. It cannot be reduced any further. So the answer is 1/800. The only time, my little trick will just say over 100. The only time that works is when if you're working with a whole number. You're not working with a fraction already. So how do you convert percents to decimals? Okay, so number one, drop the percent sign. Change the mixed percent to an improper fraction. So 12.5%, change that to an improper fraction. So you say 12 times 2, which is 24, plus 1, which is 25. So you get 25/2. Multiply the number by 1/100. So 25 times 1 is 25. 2 times 100 is equal to 200, which is, and then you simplify it, and you get 1/8. Okay, so now the heading is wrong, and it's converting percents to fractions, not to decimals. Okay, so 12.5%, it's the same as 12.5% because half is equal to 0.5. So whenever you have it in a decimal, convert it to the fraction, and then convert it to the improper fraction, times it by 1/100, and then reduce it. Man, I need to let the publishers know that they have so many errors in these PowerPoints. Okay, but there's a really, really simple formula that you're going to really need to know, not only for Chapter 6, but also for Chapter 8 when we're talking about markups and markdowns. And this is a really, really neat little diagram that I hope it's important that you find useful to you. So before I talk about what it is, let's look at this actual little circle. So portion on top, base and rate at the bottom. Now basically, if you know two out of those three, if you know two out of base, portion, and rate, you can figure out what the third one is. Okay? So whatever's on the top of the line, right, the portion, it's the that line that goes through the middle of the circle is the dividing line. So portion divided by base is equal to rate. Portion divided by rate is equal to base, right? So if you have two of them, you can figure out the third one. But that other line that's in the middle of base and rate, that's the multiplication line. If they're on the same if they're the same horizontally, if they're equal horizontally, then you can just multiply it, right? So base times rate is equal to portion. So what does this mean? Okay, so the portion is what percent of the base, all right? That's what it means. So your portion is what you have. Your rate is the percent, and the base is the total, your of, right? Of 50, of 55 for the M&Ms, that's the total. So let's look at some problems looking at that using this circle. So the sales of milk chocolate M&Ms are 80% of total M&M sales. Okay, so our rate is 80%. Now every time you use percent to calculate it, you need to convert it to the decimal form. So 80% is 0.8. Okay, that is so, so important. I want you to remember that. Anytime you are using percent in a calculation, you need to change it to the decimal point. That is why we change that is why we spend so much time on making sure you can convert percent to decimal, decimal to percent, fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction, etc., etc. Okay? So the sales of milk chocolate M&Ms are 80%, remember percent is the rate, of total M&M sales. Total M&M sales are $400,000. Okay, total is your base; it's your total quantity, right? So, what are the sales of the milk chocolate M&M? That is your portion, right? Milk chocolate is 80% of 400,000. So now, because they're equal on the bottom half, you know that you're just going to multiply. So 400,000 times 0.8 is 320,000. So basically, milk chocolate M&M sales is 320,000, which is 80% of 400,000. So all the total M&M sales that they have of 400,000, milk chocolate accounts for 320,000 of that. So from a marketing perspective, obviously this is a little off track, but I want to show you how this is applicable. You want to make sure that if you're already selling so much of this product, you want to keep pushing it. Maybe it can be more. But at the same time, you need to do something about your other products so that, you know, this $320,000, that shouldn't decrease. Okay? You should still be selling $320,000 at least of the milk chocolate, but you want everything else to increase. Right? You don't want the total to just be 400,000. You want that to be maybe 500, 600,000. So you have to do something to your other products. I hope that was just, you know, you can connect the dots between what is it that we're doing in business math and how do we apply that to business and business skills in general. Solving for base. Okay? Now, sales of peanut and other M&M chocolate candies are 20%. Right? So rate is 20 because rate is equal to percent. But the milk chocolate is 320,000. Okay? But here's, they gave you the different rate. They gave you that milk chocolate sales are 320, but they said peanut and other candies are 20%. So if peanut and other candies are 20%, then what is the chocolate M&M sales? That must be again 80%, because everything has to equal 100% total. You don't have more than total sales, right? So if 20 is the other, then all of 100 minus 20, which is 80%, is your milk chocolate, right? So your milk chocolate, your 320 is 80% of your base, okay? And that is 1 minus 0.2. So now you have your portion, which is 320,000, because that's what milk chocolate sales are. But now we want to know, what is the total sales? So the milk chocolate is 320, and it's 80%. So now we have the dividing line. The 320 portion divided by the 0.8 rate is equal to your base of 400,000. So let's look at another one, okay? Solving for rate. If sales of milk chocolate are 320,000, and the total sales are $400,000, right? So we have our portion and our base. Then what percent is it? So we just say 320 divided by 400,000, which is 0.8. That is the decimal. You convert the decimal to a percent by moving the decimal point 2 places to the right, so it becomes 80%. I hope that was really helpful, so that now when you can plug in, if you know what the portion is and if you know what the rate is, then you can just say portion divided by rate in the decimal form, and you'll get the base. If you know what the portion is and you know what the base is, you can say portion divided by base to get the rate, right? But if you know what the base and the rate are, you can just multiply it and you'll get the portion, okay? So how do you calculate the increase and the decrease? Excuse me, in percent. So when you want to say it increased by 20%, it increased by 15%, very simple. Okay, calculate the difference between the old and the new number. Like advertising costs is the one that they used. So we used to spend $500,000 on advertising. Now we spend $300,000 on advertising. What is the percent decrease? So you want to first get the difference between 500,000 and 300,000. I hope those are the same numbers I used. So 500 minus 300 is 200. Okay? That's step number 1. Step number 2, divide it by the original number, which was 500, because we went from 500 to 200 to 300, right? So we went from 500 to 300, so the difference is 200 over the original, which was 500,000, and that gives you your rate, right? So it changed by that percent, and that should be 0.40 in your calculator, which is a decimal, and then don't forget to convert your decimal to a percent. You move your decimal point 2 places to the right, so it's 40%. Okay? Rate of percent increase. Sheila Leary went to her local supermarket and bought a bag of M&Ms. The bag gave its weight as 18.4 ounces, which was 15% more than a regular 1-pound bag of M&Ms. Sheila, who is a careful shopper, wanted to check and see if she was actually getting a 15% increase. So your portion is your difference between your old and your new amount, right? So 1 pound is 16 ounces. That's the regular. That's the initial amount. It changed to 18.4. What's the difference? 18.4 minus 16, which is 2.4, divided by the old amount. So 2.4 divided by 16 and calculate it, and that is 15%. Okay, 0.15, and then you move it 2 places to the right, the decimal, to get your percent. Rate of percent decrease. The increase in the price of sugar caused M&M Mars Company to decrease the weight of each 1-pound bag to 12 ounces. So now, instead of getting 1 pound of M&Ms for a certain price, they're getting 12 ounces. Okay? So what was the old? 16. What is the new? 12. What is the difference? Step number 1. The difference between 16 and 12 is 4. Divided by the old. What were they getting? It changed from 16 to 12. So 16 was the old. 4 over 16 is 0.25, which is 25%. That is how much they decreased. Okay, so percent increase, percent decrease. Always get the difference divided by the old or the original amount, and then you'll get your decimal. Move the decimal point 2 places to the right, and you will get your percent decrease. All right, that is it for Chapter 6. I hope this was helpful to you. Again, don't forget to submit your summary by Thursday night, by midnight, to get full credit. Each day late is 10% off. So this is easy points. If you just type up what it is that I've taught, throw in some examples. A good question is, what if I was explaining this to someone who wouldn't understand this? And that is a good way to type it up so that you don't have to play, pause, and take a long time to type it out. So you can go over the steps that I've taught you. You can go over the examples that I've taught you. And hopefully that will, not hopefully, definitely be enough for your summary. All right. Good luck with your homework, and again, as always, I never get tired of saying, I hope you don't get tired of hearing. If you have any questions, if you need any help, please let me know, and I will work with you one by one through every problem. Don't forget to have this done hopefully before our live lecture on Thursday so that we can help you with questions during our live lecture, and we can work through some of the problems together. All right? Other than that, have a wonderful week.